You know, this is a really interesting piece of legislation. You just heard the brilliant comedian and philosopher, I would say, Dave Chappelle, reference how America has reckoned with this war on drugs. Do you think, given where we are, that a bill to decriminalize everything will get support from large swaths of different communities and sects of society in America?
Well, thanks for having me, and it's good to see Cassandra on here. But yeah, Tiffany, I think that the research is showing us, the studies which have been done, do signal that people in this country are looking for a new approach, and that we do recognize that the war on drugs, as initiated by the Nixon administration, was for other nefarious reasons, and it has not worked. It has not made us safer, has not changed the use of drugs. But what it did do was devastate our families and devastate our communities. So if you're asking me, do I believe that the people in the United States of America recognize that we need to change this and to move in the direction that this bill does, which is take it out of the hands of the criminal justice system and put it in the hands of Health and Human Services? Absolutely. If you're asking me about what's going to happen with this Congress, that's another question and another discussion.
Right, because how often does Congress align with the American people? It should be frequently, but not very often, unfortunately. Cassandra, I want to turn to you here because, look, a lot of people are okay with legalizing marijuana. You know, I mean, I walk down the street in my ever gentrified neighborhood, and there are, young white millennials blazing on every block. But some people do have concern about legalizing drugs like heroin, or I shouldn't say legalize, but decriminalizing these drugs, or meth. Is drug use truly a victimless crime? And what do you say to people who say, whoa, 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 I was good with the weed, not so fast with the other stuff?
So I would say one of the things that's super important here is recognizing that what the congresswomen are putting forward is divesting from criminalization and investing in health. And when we talk to people and Americans all across race, everyone understands that criminalizing people for drugs doesn't work, and that what people want are more options to help their loved ones. So that means giving them access to health care, removing the barriers that are put in place for people to get employment or get things like food stamps. And so when you have that conversation outside of the propaganda that's been pumped into our communities for the last 50 years, people start to recognize that we have more options than what has been put on the table.
Congresswoman, I want to ask you about drug dealers specifically, but first I want you to take a listen to President Nixon back when he first declared the war on drugs.
America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse. In order to fight and defeat this enemy, it is necessary to wage a new all-out offensive. I have asked the Congress to provide the legislative authority and the funds to fuel this kind of an offensive.
So this bill does a lot of things. You just heard President Nixon talk about this war on drugs, but I'm curious where drug dealers fall into this, because look, you've got like your corner boys, your duffel bag boys, and then you have the drug kingpins. But of course, we don't talk a lot about the biggest drug kingpin of the 80s, which was the United States government itself. So when we come to decriminalizing drugs and creating a pathway to freedom for people who have been ensnared needlessly in the system, what does this legislation do to ease the re-entry process for some folks who were arrested before?
Well, this bill addresses the individual user. This bill does not deal with the drug dealers. And what this bill does is make the re-entry for those who have been incarcerated or negatively impacted by by being caught with a substance abuse for their own personal use. We didn't move into the area of decriminalizing the job, the work of the drug dealer. We're concentrating on the folks, the individuals that have been so negatively impacted by this war on drugs that really had nothing to do with making our community safer or getting people off of drugs. This was a malicious effort by probably the number one enemy to the United States at that time, Richard Nixon, to marginalize Black communities, to marginalize those who he referred to as the lefties, so that they could advance their political ideology at the expense of people. And it resulted in devastating our communities in particular.
Indeed, it did, Cassandra. And I will say, look, this bill actually does do some things. I think for people who were caught up, it would prohibit the denial of employment, immigration status, public benefits, voting rights, et cetera, which is major. Under this legislation, Cassandra, I know you were helpful and instrumental in shaping it. The authority and criteria for the classification of drugs would shift from the Attorney General to Health and Human Services. Why is that important?
Because drugs are about health. Like, if we're having a conversation about a public health issue, then it really needs to be dealt with people that focus on health and human services in this country. Drugs being dealt with under the criminal justice system impedes us from actually getting to the things that we need for our communities, which is resources, health, and infrastructure. If we are focused, if drugs are under the Department of Justice, then the only thing that we are saying is that we are going to have criminal justice interventions. Right. And what we know is that this is a health issue, and so it should be under Health and Human Services.
All right. Well, we'll definitely keep our eye to see if this legislation passes Congress, and hopefully we'll see Joe Biden sign it into law. We'll keep our eye on it. Thank you so much, Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman and Cassandra Frederique, for joining us.